It's National Library Week, and at the Sun Prairie Public Library, our mission is simple yet profound. The Sun Prairie Public Library is here to serve our community with lifelong learning opportunities and literacy experiences for all. At the library, literacy in all of its forms is at the heart of what we do. So we're so happy to be celebrating National Library Week this year with an award-winning author. Kashmira Sheth, author of I'm From Here Too, is here with us today. I'm From Here Too is her latest novel and is an NCSS CBC Notable Social Studies Trade Book and a Jane Addams Children's Book Award finalist. We're so happy to have you here in Sun Prairie, and welcome, Kashmira.
So we are so happy to have you here with us, Kashmira. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, thank you for having me. I was born and raised in India, and when I was 18, I came here to study microbiology. But growing up, I was exposed to a lot of stories. There were stories that my grandparents told me, my father told me, and of course there was my uncle and aunt, and we had a large family. So I was always surrounded by stories. And I think that was probably the beginning of my lifelong love for books, and of course what it imparts, all the stories about various culture, different places, and everything like that. But I did study science though. So I became a microbiologist and I worked in my field. I had no idea that I was going to someday start writing, but that was my background. And then I met and married my husband right here in Madison, and things changed then.
So, I mean, you kind of started to touch on this. Did you always know that you wanted to be a writer? Like, did you write as a child? Or when did you first discover your love for writing?
So, looking back, I realized that I always loved literature. Growing up, I studied in my own language of Gujarati. I'm from western part of India, and unlike some other, my actually cousins and even my own brother who studied in English, I studied in Gujarati at a Montessori school. And that, I think, was very interesting because it was a different type of literature that I was exposed to. A lot of Gandhian literature written in 1920s and 30s, and also some of the older ones, written in 14th, 15th century. And then I had to learn Hindi because that was, it is spoken by majority, or it's not, India has many languages, but it is spoken by many people. And then English, and I had to learn Sanskrit. So there are a lot of languages, and a lot of languages means a lot of stories and a lot of things in those languages, poetry, whatever it is, it's there. And I did write poetry in my language for my mother and my friends and things like that, but I never thought about becoming an author. That just wasn't on my radar or on anybody's radar. So I decided that I'll be, go into science. And when I got admitted at Iowa State University, I came and did my microbiology and did my master's here at UW. I found out that after I had my two daughters, and then when they started reading books in school, when they brought school, assignment, about different books or whatever stories they were working on, I started reading with them because I wanted to know what they were reading. It wasn't part of my own childhood. None of those stories were part of my childhood, so I started reading them. And I think that kind of gave me an idea that I had story bubbling in my head that I wanted to tell, and that's how my first book, Blue Jasmine, came about, that I wanted to share. At that time, I didn't realize publishing was hard, that difficult, but I thought, if nothing else, my kids will see something about my emotions, my journey from coming from one place to another and how I adjusted. Because for them, Wisconsin will always be home. They were born here, but it wasn't so for me. Mm-hmm. So I started writing at that point.
Very cool. Thank you for sharing.
Wow. I mean, I feel like I've heard your stories over the years, but I feel like I always learn something new when you share your stories. And yeah, just your transition from being in the science field to letting it all go to writing, and maybe in some ways not knowing how difficult the publishing world was, in some ways freeing for you, whereas for some people that go into it knowing that this is hard and there's a lot of rejection, it can be something that stops you from pursuing it. But yes. You touched on this. April is National Poetry Month, and the central character, Anoop, is a poet. What was your inspiration for writing I'm From Here Too in that style, in the poetry prose style?
I think whenever I start a book, there is an idea first, right, in my head about something I want to write about. But when I start thinking concretely and put it down, it comes out as a voice of that person. So a lot of these books were written in past tense, but when I wrote Voice Without Name, it came out in present tense. I don't know why. And so when I started writing I'm From Here Too, it came out more, in a poetry form. I don't know why. It wasn't my conscious decision right at the very beginning. But then I looked and I said, well, this makes sense. He's a sensitive, man, well, young child or older child, but he's at the verge of change. And because he's so sensitive, the poetry is something that he loves. And maybe thinking about him before in my head that it came out that way, at his voice, I don't know. And I'm trying to look back and think, why did I do that? But I'm not 100% sure. But I think part of it is also Sikh. Guru Granth Sahib is all poem. And I attended Kirtan, where they sing at the Sikh Gurudwara. And all that music and, prayers that are all sung, it just kind of brought it together. Like he would be somebody who likes to pour his emotions in a poetry.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you chose that format. I felt like it really worked, and it flowed so well. It was easy to read in that way, and easy to connect with the characters. And like you said, that it seems like poetry is such a great format to use when you're really trying to connect with those emotions and your vulnerabilities. And I felt like that was what his character needed.
Right.
And that was how he expressed himself.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you.
So comparing it to like your other book, because every book you write is so different, really. There's such a wide variety in your books. How long did it take you to write I'm From Here Too? Like from the idea all the way through publication, how long did that take?
So each book is different. Yeah. And the idea actually came in after 2012 attack on Sikh Gurudwara in Wisconsin here. So, it was very fresh in my mind at that time that I wanted to do something about it. But that was just a little idea. And then, when I started writing, dribbling a little bit of poetry here and there, but I was also working on my Nina Soni series at that time. And so I kind of kept writing. And usually I work on multiple projects because sometimes I'm stuck in one and I always have something. So I kind of kept putting things out. But then after Nina Soni was supposed to come out, and then COVID came, and then it was a year delayed and things. And so after 6 Nina Soni book, that's when then this came out that I started I'm From Here Too. But I'd been working kind of on and off, but last maybe about a year before the publication that I really got into it, or year and a half, I should say.
Is there one of your books that you think took the longest from idea to publication?
I think maybe I'm From Here Too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the idea was all, like I said, 2012,
Yeah.
From Oak Creek, Wisconsin, Gurdwara attack. So that's a long time.
Right.
But it wasn't, it wasn't always, I wasn't working for so many years on it.
You just had that idea in your head.
Right,
Yeah.
right. I'll say that Coil Dark Mango Sweet was my quickest turnaround on book.
Oh,
I was
wow.
writing that, and my kids were in school, and they wanted to read what I wrote that day, and so I had to keep. There was a lot of pressure.
They motivated you. Yeah, yeah, that was great.
So as we know, there's a specific incident that really spurs this.
Yeah.
I'm from here too. But are there parts of the story that draw inspiration from your own life at all?
I think each book has part of me in it, of
Yeah.
course. Always, when I was young, I always questioned, if we are all equal, why is there, why are some people considered, higher and some lower in the caste system? All those things were always bubbling in my head. So sometimes I feel like I write to answer my own questions. Other thing, I think one of the most important thing is, and I'm from here too, Anup is first generation American. His parents have come from India. In this case, I'm Anup's parent. How am I doing in my life when I see my child? And then I remember my children try to protect me from a lot of things. And that's what Anup is trying to do. I had an interesting conversation with my editor about it. He said, wouldn't Anup tell his parents right away? I said, no, he wouldn't, because he would try to, protect his parents. And that's a child of an immigrant, always trying to do something to, not all, but, trying to help the parents in any way, shield them from any way they can, because they know they work hard or whatever they are facing. I think even though Anup is very close to his parents, he did that, and I know my two daughters did that too, and a lot of other kids. So I think that part is very much of my own background.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like there's a sense of a need to protect, your family, your parents in this case, and also if you are bullied, there's a feeling of embarrassment, which that is associated with that, even though there shouldn't be, and you should be free to tell adults that you trust, but you start to feel like you need to keep that secret and put your head down and keep going. So I think that really came out in Anup's story. And you tackle such big subjects in this book, like bullying, racism, violence, mass shootings. And I'm sure that must have been very emotionally challenging while you were writing it. How did you approach these tough subjects?
So mass shooting was already there, right? It had happened,
I mean,
and
it's
it had
crazy.
affected
It was
me.
over 10 years ago.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was already there. And then as I wrote, I really wrote incrementally about bullying. I would write a short thing, and then I'd move on to something a little bit more, a little bit different, a little bit lighter, and kept going, and then sometimes expanding, just writing down, and that helped, I think, because to get into too much deeper all at once with everything is emotionally really hard to deal with, at least for me. I know that because I know I cried a lot when I wrote Keeping Corner, because it was something I had to do, and I did it. It's a historical fiction. With Anup's story, it was very close, in the sense of physical proximity and what had happened. So I just started writing slowly those scenes, and then expanded them, incorporated them, and tried to build that little bit of momentum. First he's teased, then a little more, and then a little more, to kind of, I think that tough things are harder to write and emotionally draining, but then after that there is a lot of release.
Yeah, I could see that, and I think that is true definitely with poetry, and We actually recently at the library had an open mic for poetry night, and it was just amazing to see even people that had it was their first attempt at writing poetry, and they had written their poems that they not only wrote, which I think is brave in and of itself, but then to share them out loud was very, very powerful.
Yes.
And I think I'm From Here too does that. And I really like how you said that, you tackled it by writing about it, but then taking a break from it, because I think even for Anoop, he has to do that. He can't be in it all the time.
That's right.
It's too much for anyone.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Definitely. Yeah.
So you talk about being Sikh in India as well as in the U.S. And even though I was born in India, I don't know much about the Sikh faith. I mean, I know certain things, the Guru, and I know that you had said poetry is a big part of the faith, which I didn't know until you just said that. But I did learn quite a bit from reading your book, I'm From Here Too. Was there anything that you learned about the Sikh faith in your research for this book?
So I learned one term that really resonated with me, and I did not know was chardi kala, that the view of life is buoyant, not get down, just feel that as the moon, the phase of moon, where it gets bigger and bigger, that's rather than just going down. And I thought that was very inspirational, because writing Anoop's story, I was sometimes getting down, and then to have this view of that, I think that was great. A lot of other concepts like Omkar, Ek Omkar, or about the service and all that. I knew that, but I did not know about as much service part of the faith as I knew the philosophy, because it's Hindu, Advaita, it's the same thing. That's the one thing that binds us all, we are one. But I did not know about the service, that it's such a big part of the community, and that's why they have langar, where they feed anybody that comes in at Gurudwara. And that was, I think, was eye-opening. I mean, I kind of knew it, but didn't knew the extent and how the Sikh, people following the faith took it, to their heart and what they did.
Yeah.
I have to say, I was fascinated by so many of the details of the Sikh faith that you included. Like, when she said, I went to go put my name in to wash the floors, and there was this long wait to wash the floor.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's amazing.
Right, and to feed 100,000 people every day, every single day, and have the kitchen going for 24/7.
Yeah, such generous, unquestionable generosity.
Right, and no faith, nobody's bar, and everybody sits at the same level. I like that. I like that everybody's treated the same. That was always, I think, my biggest draw to the religion, that, there was nobody. Some people didn't get the VIP treatment and got table and chairs, and somebody, everybody's same.
You draw a lot of parallels with Anoop's experiences in America, along with his grandfather's experiences during partition in India. Partition is not necessarily something that we study in the U.S., at least not in grade school, I think, or K through 12. Maybe in college you might take a specialty course. But, obviously being from India and having family from India, I know probably not as much as I should about the history of partition. I know it's a very painful history in India's history, and it wasn't that long ago. Can you share a little bit about that and some of the threads that you intertwine in I'm From Here Too?
So interestingly, I was born in free India, but partition wasn't that, far, back. And it's a painful history, and you'll be surprised to know that we hardly studied any of that. We studied India's struggle for independence. We studied British, how, all the laws, the salt law, Morley, Minto's law, all kinds of things we studied, all the viceroys and stuff. When it came to partition, we studied that there was partition, but we did not study what happened at the partition, which was, and my brother and I talk about that often. It is actually in the last, I think, several, maybe, people are exploring more of that. And I know that I was in Mumbai, and my mom always said that the Sindhi people, because Sindh province was divided, and the Sindhis came to Mumbai, and they were refugees. And they really worked hard. But, we never studied that part. And so after coming here, I learned more about it. And I think as the country probably moved away from that personal, intense thing that they talk about. I have some friends whose parents came and nobody wanted to talk about it. It was so painful. And then maybe India was recently independent. They didn't want to talk about that painful part. But I think now there's just many, many books and many, many things that are coming out. And maybe the distance helps you feel the less of the pain and more wanting to know and explore the different feelings. It's not so, right there. And
it's not as raw.
Right, right. So it's interesting, but there were more than 10 million refugees, going back and forth, and over 1 million people massacred. It was very violent. It just wasn't people going from one place to another. It was very violent. Trains coming and going, and everybody dead on them, so killed. So it was a very, and maybe that's why it's so hard. And nobody expected that. Not political leaders, not British, nobody expected that, not people, obviously.
Yeah. I wonder if it wasn't taught in history because of probably several factors. One, that, you always hear the saying that history is written by the winners. But then there's also just like you said, it was so raw and new and painful that it was just really hard to even make sense of it. My father was a teenager when India became free and or independent, and so I know that struggle was more about the freedom, but then, like you said, the aftermath was not necessarily something that because it's not a source of pride for anybody.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's so ironic because the freedom fight was nonviolent, and that was the principle. And then what happened? And maybe there was a, feeling of not only not just disappointment, but shame and heartbreak of what had happened. And so they wanted to, I can see the Indian leaders wanted to gloss over it, and the books glossed over it. We did not study that part at all. So, I think there was such a big, long struggle for independence, and finally we got it. And this was the really sad part of it, and they wanted to keep it out, maybe. But as I think a lot of authors have explored this.
It's fascinating to me to hear about your experiences learning about it in India, because even as a teenager in the 90s in the U.S., in high school, I learned quite a bit about the Indian struggle for independence, but nothing after that. I'm realizing this because I've only learned about it from more recent books.
Right.
It's in many ways pretty similar to U.S. history, like with the Civil War
Correct.
and the decades after that of people being displaced and
Right.
so kind of in some ways refugees within your own country.
Yeah.
But in India and Pakistan, obviously it's,
Right.
you know, yeah,
Yeah.
still a struggle.
Right.
Yeah. Well, we've talked about a lot of heavy things, but maybe bringing it back to some lighter things. You make many references to different foods sprinkled throughout the story, and I noticed that you do that pretty much in all of your books. And so I know food and references to them are really important to the storytelling. Can you, kind of describe that and why that is and why those details are so important?
Don't you think maybe I like food too much?
Yeah. Well, maybe, but I didn't want to.
Be hungry to read your books.
Yeah. But I feel like the Indian subcontinent, the food, we use kind of similar spices and stuff, but how West India, where I'm from, food is so different from Southern India, where you're from, Svetha. And then you look at Punjab, and their food is so different than what we have, and yet we use almost the same ingredients. I mean, it's amazing how it's made. So food has always been, and I like to cook, and I think if I'm writing a story, and I'm always writing from either story set in India or story set here with the Indian diaspora. So I feel like food is a big part of any culture, and I want to kind of weave that in. What do you eat? And part of it looks more than probably what it should, is because I kind of have to describe a little bit. So if I say I had a, French toast, I don't have to describe what a French toast is, right? I mean, I can say that, or I had a quiche for lunch. I don't have to. But if I'm writing about, say, palak paneer or aloo chole or papdi chaat, I have to say what it is. It doesn't mean anything. So I think, in a way, it kind of makes it like I write a lot about food, but it has to be more than one word about I ate this, because it doesn't evoke any kind of like when you say French toast, it's sweet, right? It's not spicy. And if you say I had a chips and guacamole, then it's a different image. But I need to kind of expand a little bit.
I love the food descriptions because
Yeah.
it just makes your mouth water and pucker. And it's really interesting because I do tend to gravitate towards stories that are about the immigrant experience and just in general like to read about what that is, because it's obviously not monolithic and it's so different for everyone. But but what seems to be pretty universal for immigrants as they are here for multiple generations, but pretty quickly the way people dress and language is one of the first things that I don't want to say lost is necessarily the right word, but one of the things that assimilates to someone's new place. But food, it seems to be enduring for generations, and then actually taken on by your new country.
That is so true.
And so I find that fascinating, and obviously fusion food is just very popular. And I think Italian food in the U.S. is so popular, and obviously Italian Americans have been here for many generations, and and is almost sometimes people forget that that's not quote unquote American.
Right,
Yeah.
Actually, my aunt and uncle were visiting yesterday and talking about food. She's from Iowa, and talking about her older brother. And she said, Ted never liked anything but, very American. Now he loves Indian food. So in that generation of, many years, he has switched from one thing. And he said he just loves it. So people do, like you said, the food is enduring, but it also goes into, the main, and people are liking those things. And the food kind of makes you feel like, these people who eat, who has made this food for centuries, and now you get to taste it. I think it's great.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, even in Sun Prairie, we have many more ethnic restaurants and grocery stores than we ever did. So, yeah, it's great.
I love trying new food. That's why I love reading your descriptions, because sometimes I'm like, have I eaten that? I'm not, oh, I think I have. But I can only tell by the description, not by the name.
Right. Okay.
So I really appreciate your description as like a non-Indian background. You know.
Yeah, and especially children, right? I write for children. They need to have some kind of idea as to what kind of food are you talking about.
Well, your stories have so much in them, you know, whether it's food or the heavier topics you've talked about. What do you hope readers will come away with, you know, from reading I'm From Here Too?
I think more than anything, I wanted to explore how a child feels when they feel, you know, scared for where they are, what they are, just being themselves, right? And how the bullying can affect them, how the violence, even if it hasn't touched them, but it's around them, can, you know, affect them, because they are in that transition, you know, coming of age. And then I wanted to explore more deeper thing that, you know, we are all bound by our emotions. We all want to be happy. We all want to be accepted. We want to feel secure. And a child more so when they are just coming out of that, you know, from cocoon of family to a little bit of friendship to school, which is a lot more for them. It's a different place. And I think everybody wants the same thing. So I just hope that they feel like we can, you know, this person may have something different, but we are more similar than we think we are. So I just hope that.
I think you're successful.
I mean, Anup wears different, you know, he wears the head cover. I mean, looking at somebody, he has brown skin, you think, you know, and then his food may be very different, but then, you know, he's still a young boy growing up in Wisconsin. So.
He may wear a turban or...
But so.
Do you currently have another project that you're working on? What's up next?
I do a lot of different writing at the same time, but I do have a picture book coming out next April. It's about 3 refugees kind of thread from 3 different places, so coming in. And I didn't realize, but they from 3 different religions when I was writing. I didn't think about that, but that's what it comes out. I mean, not that religion is a big part of the story at all, but it just happens to be, and as I was looking.
Do you have a title yet?
It's called Taking Flight.
Okay. And have you partnered with an illustrator already for that one?
Yeah, so my agent, when she knew, one of her clients, she has several clients, but one of the client is an illustrator, and he's author too, but she suggested that we partner together and sell it as a complete project. Usually, you know, so it's coming out from Dial, part of Random House Penguin imprint, and she sent the whole package, you know, to different people, and so it's going to be published by them. So Nicolo Corsi, he lives in Italy.
Oh, wow.
But it's her client, so we are both her, you know, client, and then it worked out. He loved the story, and then he said he would do it, prepare dummies, you know, and that's how it was sold. So
does it mean you get to go visit Italy then?
He has invited me, but I don't know. I don't know. Maybe someday.
Wow.
But,
Any final lasting thoughts or questions? I don't know. I feel like we could sit here for hours.
I know. I think we could talk forever. I do. I guess that your picture book information kind of leads me to a little bit of a question, or because one thing I noticed in this, in I'm From Here Too, you know, there are kind of some stylistic differences, you know, like where it goes from light pages to dark pages, and is that an idea that you had, or that like an editor or a publisher, or like how did that come about?
So the dark pages are the Anup's poetry that he writes, And so we had a disperse. So we had an in-depth talk about how do we do that.
Okay.
You know, how do we put that so we know that the other part is more or less straightforward. The emotional part was the one that he gets to tell more. And we talked about it, and we thought maybe the writing could be, you know, the different font or different things. But then they came up with this idea of having the darker pages that looks, you know, that more, I felt like in a way like a deeper, you know, like it's his things rather than just somebody, him telling like everyday thing, but this is his emotion poured into something deeper. And that's how they came. And I like the idea that it's separated without saying too much or without, jarring.
It's not like a big note, like, this is Anoop.
And or all the time my saying, and then, I mean, or Anoop saying, and then I wrote this, or, you know, and then I pick up my pen and write it. That's how I had started, you know, because I did not know how do I separate that, you know.
Right.
But then you know, they figured this out. So I'm happy for that.
Yeah, it works.
And a lot of people have mentioned that, you know, yes, it is.
Yeah, it's subtle as the you know, as he is.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And a good stylistic choice, you know, when you think about, so.
Well, we thank you so much for coming to the Sun Prairie Public Library and the Sun Prairie Media Center to meet and talk with us. And gosh, congratulations on yet another award-winning book. Thank you.
Thank you, Svetha. Thank you, Lynn. It's always fun to be back here.
Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thank you.